Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, How ZoomInfo Expanded Its Global Business Coverage by 6x. We are thrilled to have everyone join us. My name is Stephen Brierton. I'm the SVP of Sales here for ZoomInfo. Today, I will be your host and one of the presenters. In addition to myself, I am joined by my ZoomInfo colleagues, Simon McDougall, our Chief Compliance Officer, as well as Brandon Tucker, our VP of Data Strategy. We will kick things off here shortly, but before we do, a few housekeeping items. So one, if you are experiencing any issues with viewing or hearing today's session, please let us know by utilizing the Q&A chat on your screen. A friendly tip oftentimes is to refresh the browser you're streaming in by pushing F5 or Command R on a Mac. This should fix any connectivity issues you're experiencing, but if the issue does persist, please let us know. We will try to do our best to address it. We will also be using the Q&A chat to ask our experts questions that may arise throughout, so please don't be shy to use that. We've carved out a few minutes at the end to be sure we cover off as many of those questions as we possibly can. As always, these sessions are being recorded. You will receive that recording here within 48 hours after we conclude today, alongside some additional resources for you all. And if you'd like to dive more into today's topic, we've posted a few resources in the resources console for you for your reference. Now, lastly, before we begin, our ZoomInfo Safe Harbor statement. As a publicly traded Zoom company, this presentation may contain certain forward-looking statements. Any buying decision you make of ZoomInfo should be made based solely upon currently available products and offerings. Our complete safe harbor statement is displayed here for your review. And with that, I would like to welcome my colleagues, Simon and Brandon, to the floor. Hello, fellas.
Hey, Steve.
Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well. We are sort of global today. Brandon's joining us from our Vancouver, Washington headquarters. Simon and myself are here in our London, UK office. We thought it would be fitting to cover off our global coverage from global locations. So thanks for staying late and joining early for everybody here. As we go through today, one of the big things that we are going to be talking about, really the entirety of this webinar, is really highlighting the international expansion in our data coverage and breadth and quality that ZoomInfo has had over the last several years. This is fueled by a multi-million-dollar investment that we have made both into the product as well as into the data, our data collection methods, the teams that support the data, not just from collection, but curation and obviously compliance and the like. And what that has resulted in over the last 2 years is a pretty stark difference. So if you are a ZoomInfo customer and haven't taken a look at our international or global coverage in a while, or if you are potentially evaluating ZoomInfo, one of the misnomers that you may often hear out there or have had based on prior perceptions is that ZoomInfo, North American-based company, really strong when it comes to North American coverage and business-to-business data. But global coverage lacks. It's a piece of feedback that we had heard over the years. But as a business, we've made a real concerted effort over the last couple of years with significant investments into the technology to change that narrative, change that perception, and more importantly, support our global customers where they need us the most. Today's world is far more interconnected than it ever has been. And so as a result of that, what you see today is a 200% increase in the number of companies that we track globally across Europe and the rest of the globe. That's resulted in a 4x increase in the number of contacts. You see that growing by 300%, north of 200 million contacts in growth over the last couple of years, more than 112 million email growth, and then the ways to contact those prospects. So not just growing company and contact data, but the data points that support those company contacts, I should say, the sellers, the marketers of the world that need to be able to reach their prospects. How do they do that? They do it via email, and more so today than ever, they do it via direct dial phone number. More than 32 million have grown there, a 2x growth, and then 45 million additional mobile phone numbers so that sellers are able to connect with their prospects as a whole. Brandon, I'm going to throw it over to you here. to talk a little bit about that coverage and what it looks by region and how we went about doing and solving some of those challenges for our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, what we have here, and one thing we often hear, especially when we walk through that first slide, is, well, what does this actually mean in specific geos? Did you just add, tens of millions of contacts in a specific country or something? You can see that the distribution is actually very strong across all regions of the world. We're always happy to provide these breakdowns based on specific countries or any geo-defined territory that you're interested in seeing a little bit more insight into. But I did want to hit on some of the initiatives that really drove a lot of this growth as well. There were really three major areas that allowed us to really accelerate and improve our contact coverage, company coverage, and then all that contact info that Steve just mentioned. And those three things really were improving the quality of the international data that we already had, prioritizing international data from our contributory network, and then improving a lot of our algorithms and pipelines to create new contacts, especially for those based in the UK and Europe, really all while maintaining our dedication to privacy and compliance regulations that Simon will talk about in a bit. I'll take a quick minute just to talk through a few specific examples within those three buckets. Oftentimes, those three buckets actually come together to produce, a single contact with an accurate title and some contact info, but I'll just walk through a couple examples too. So one thing most of our customers probably don't know is that while we now have, 210 million global contacts, over 300 million contacts published total, we have even more than that unpublished, either because they're incomplete or the quality is at a certain threshold where we're not confident enough to actually make that data available to our customers. So one of the first things we did when we wanted to start to expand our global data was we looked at all our existing data and bucketed it into the opportunities that we had to bring and make some of that data available based on us either validating some of the existing data we had or acquiring some new data. So one thing that we saw is we had a lot of these unpublished contacts, but we were missing geographical location data for them. And so we pointed a lot of our data sources and data acquisition systems at just acquiring that geographical location for those contacts. And once we were able to acquire and validate that data, it actually allowed us to bring some of those contacts online. The next element really related to our contributory network is that some of our customers, when they use some of our applications and products, we actually get a little metadata that helps us validate some of the existing data that we're a little less confident in. And so in some cases, we might have had an unpublished contact, and we might see 3 or 4 different email addresses that we've acquired from various sources over the years. But when we run them through NeverBounce, our SMTP email validation tool, all 4 of them come back as accept all or unable to determine. We've got algorithms that'll actually score how likely it is that those emails are good. And it'll say all 4 of them are, less than 50% likely to actually deliver. What we're able to do and what we've been able to do with some of our contributory network data is we've actually been able to look at some of the email delivery data to help us corroborate and validate which of those 4 emails are actually correct. And so customers who use our Engage product, for example, and opt into our contributory network, we're actually then able to see that, hey, someone tried to email this one email address maybe a few months ago and it resulted in a hard bounce. But we're actually seeing that this other email's produced, 4 successful deliveries in the last 2 weeks. So we were able to use some of that metadata on the actual emails that we're seeing bouncing and delivering to help us validate, the quality of the data that we had, but weren't sure which value was actually correct. And the last thing we did was really optimize some of our existing processes to be mindful of those privacy and compliance regulations and rules that we enforce as it relates to publishability. We will not publish a contact in Europe unless we've sent them a privacy notice. The way a lot of our systems work, though, was that we would publish contacts even if we didn't have an email, and then have processes that run downstream to go and acquire that email later. So if we saw on a company website that, Simon McDougall is Chief Compliance Officer, of ZoomInfo, for example, but there wasn't an email address, we would still attempt to publish that contact. What would happen, though, and what was happening is we would see that Simon was based in Europe. We didn't have an email for him. We couldn't send a notice. And so we actually wouldn't publish him at all. we rewrote a lot of those pipelines to make sure that we acquired and validated emails prior to publishing those contacts. And that also resulted in us being able to unlock a lot of the significant UK and EU growth that's captured in this slide. So yeah, with that, we can move to the next slide. But just to reemphasize, we were really focused on increasing a lot of our coverage and accuracy through just improving the data that we already had, prioritizing our contributory network, and then improving our algorithms and processes for profiling UK and European data.
Yeah, it's great stuff. I think, look, what hopefully helps bring this to light, is ZoomInfo has more than 35,000 global customers. We're lucky enough to work with some of the world's most sophisticated firms in all different industries. And Brandon and his team, as a result of that, about a year ago, was working with a couple of those organizations. As you can imagine, really strict, in-depth procurement processes, massive data science teams to go through and uncover and make sure they're spending, investing their dollars in the ways that can best support their sales and marketing efforts. And so what we're taking a look at here is a year ago, a couple of those customers came to us and said, hey, look, we're running some evaluations. We use you guys in North America. There's potential to advance globally, but you're just sort of coming up short in some of these areas. And you can see for some of the firms that while ZoomInfo grew and was focused predominantly on North America, there were alternatives that perhaps started in UK or just started focusing their efforts a little bit more on the global data. And they were marginally better in some of those areas when you run those side by sides. And today, a year later, that is not the case. You see far more green from a ZoomInfo perspective, where we've been able to bring significant growth and as a result, significant value back to our customers that are focusing on those international markets. Bernie, you want to talk through just sort of some of the process that you guys walked through to do that analysis with the customers?
Yeah, absolutely. And as Steve mentioned, while we've been investing in global data growth for the last couple of years, I want to emphasize it really wasn't until the last 8 months that we started to become, the undisputed leader as it relates to contact coverage in the market. And so what we did is we worked with some of our customers to just really understand how they were evaluating our data from a very objective perspective. And so what we typically were doing and what a lot of our customers do is, they pull a list of contacts or they run searches of contacts across these geos. And then they start just by evaluating what are the counts. They look at how many contacts were returned, how many of those contacts had emails, and how many of those contacts had mobile phones that they could call into. Just the midpoint of last year, as you can see here on the right side, we were pretty consistently behind across almost all of these countries. And then as of Q3 of last year, we really started to pull ahead. This is something that we still run, every single month just to help us understand how we're progressing and how the market's moving. And I will emphasize too that all of this comes with the quality standard that ZoomInfo is known for. So not only have we surpassed a lot of the competition as it relates to email coverage and mobile coverage, our emails deliver at a much higher rate. Our customers see far lower bounce rates with us than our competitors. And the same is true for actually calling into the mobile phones. The number of disconnected lines and complete calls are consistently higher with ZoomInfo than a lot of the other providers in the market.
Yeah, I often, because I'm on the new sales side and get to speak with so many customers, I sort of refer to our data as sort of a trifecta. So we talked a lot about coverage and quantity. You just hit quality components, connect rates, validity of the data, deliverability of the email addresses that our customers get to see. The last part of that trifecta, though, Simon, is being able to do it in a compliance first and a data privacy sort of focused manner. You know, talk through some of the challenges and what we do from a privacy perspective.
Thank you, Steve, for the seamless link there. That was excellent. So yeah, and the first thing to say is that the work we do in privacy and compliance obviously didn't start in the last year. We're building on very strong foundations. And even before I joined at the start of 2022, we said lots of privacy regulation in the US. We had international data around the world already, and we had a very kind of strong foundation to work on. So even before we had this big international data push, we had the largest team in our market, supported by a very strong culture of privacy across the board, which is one of the reasons I joined. we already had our global notice and opt-out program where it doesn't matter where anybody is around the world, if they are contactable, they will receive the notice. And the notice is GDPR compliant, but it is also compliant with many other regulations around the world. It's all the usual things a notice does. And we respect and service and process within hours or at most a few days an opt-out request from anywhere around the world. And we already had tools in the platform itself, such as servicing do not call lists and our compliance API. So we already had this functionality there. So we had these foundations in place. And in particular, I think the fact that we had a global approach to notice, opt-out, governance, compliance meant that as we went into this push, we didn't have to go and fiddle around with all those regulatory challenges. We're able just to kind of support the big push into improving the quality and quantity of the data we had. But what has happened in the last year is my function has almost doubled in size, and that includes actually putting a lot more people into horizon scanning. That's where we actually look out onto the rest of the world and say, okay, what new regulations out there that's going to affect us and affect our customers. Providing the scope of what we do there, pushing beyond pure privacy to AI regulation, data broking, and just the wave of new regulation on the privacy side. You've seen a few of those on that lovely map there. So we've actually kind of really increased the resourcing and deepened the skill set of the team. We've also done a lot of work on improving the configurability of the system. One thing we learned, especially as we've worked with more global customers and we've increasingly had very large customers, is that we can provide our view on how these rules and regulations work. And I like to know that we know roughly what we're talking about here. But very often customers have a different view. And they say, well, that's great, but you know what, we don't actually want to do X in Germany or Y in France. And so being able to actually provide configurability in the platform and say, okay, well, that's fine. We won't use that data source. We won't use that country. But you can have the value from the rest of the platform and allow our customers to use it themselves. It means our customers can manage their own risk where they want to use part of the functionality but not other parts. That's been critical. We've also improved our transparency, so actually how we explain this to everybody. We have a trust center, and we have a way in which customers can go on and sign up to an NDA and get hold of quite a lot of detailed governance documentation, because we've got nothing to hide. On the contrary, we actually like talking about this kind of thing, so we want to share this with customers. And then finally, Steve, what we have also done is provide more guidance directly to customers. Very often, especially on the international stage, what our customers will do when we have conversations with them around the privacy and risk governance is they'll first ask, well, ZoomInfo, how do you do it? And we'll answer those questions, and they'll often go, well, that's fantastic, thank you. And that can often be a few minutes of conversation. And then the question is, well, how do we use the data? Can we use this for email marketing in France, or can we use this for a blanket campaign over here, or do we need to go down to local regulation? And so we've produced guidance on walking our customers through that. They still have to own their risk and compliance, obviously, but we can use our expertise and what we're seeing as good market practice to make sure that we don't just provide data and services, but our customers can get the most value out of it. So that's how we've kind of shifted from having very strong foundations to having a real max value on what we can do internationally. So that, as a result, means that we have been able to provide all this data at scale. We have confidence in how we're doing it. It's been very timely in the last year because the new AI wave has made lots of customers have asked questions around sources of data, where does this data come from, and we can answer those questions. And we're going to carry on just doing this as we go forward. Carry on being privacy first, carry on being a trusted partner to our customers, and carry on trying to lead the industry in responsible data processing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of unique nuggets there. I know Brandon and you and I are working with a software firm. There's another major entity that we're working with, to Simon's point, of having the understanding to say, we're not comfortable with this component, so we're not going to use that data points, or we prefer if you don't serve us that data point, and having that flexibility, if you will, and the sort of dynamicism to be able to understand, okay, this customer has a little bit of a different risk tolerance than that customer, and being able to meet them where they are is...
Exactly. Sometimes with a customer, it's to do with their culture. Some customers are just more risk averse than others. Sometimes they're in different industries. Sometimes it's something practical. They've actually had an issue with a regulator in a particular country, and they don't want to have any more issues with that, and so they one of us going to close the whole country down, but everywhere else we're good. So it's always a matter of just working through with customers, and everyone is unique.
Yeah. Thank you, Simon. It's great. Long and short of it is, if you have any of those type of questions, existing customer or not, and how you can rely on data to fuel your go-to-market motions, there are a few better teams here than Simon and his growing team. And look, I think that is sort of the differentiated approach that ZoomInfo provides, right? Brandon can talk through this a little bit more, but you hear from ZoomInfo's perspective, being able to take a multitude of data sources, distill that down to highly accurate, high quality information, and do it in a way that, as much as we can, limit some of the risk that our clients might be facing, to go out and be on the forefront of a privacy first motion. This is, if you get excited about data, and a lot of us here at ZoomInfo do, you can sort of geek out on some of the things that we do here, but I'll let Brandon just talk through at a high level how we think about collecting, curating, and then ultimately serving that information out.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it isn't just about, the data acquisition component. A lot of really where the magic happens and where a lot of the differentiation comes from is in the diversity of the types of data that we're acquiring, and then the engine that we've invested 20 plus years in, really bringing in all the data together. From a source perspective, I did touch on a little bit of this before, but at this point, we do have a pretty diverse set of sources really contributing all the data attributes and components that we offer here at ZoomInfo. On a weekly basis, we're actually observing over 100 million records and events contributed through that contributory network that I hit on a little bit earlier. We're processing and capturing over 20,000 different topics associated with web activity and web-based research. That's the foundation for a lot of our buyer intent type data as well. And a lot of this gets really complemented and validated with our data research team, and then also data that's publicly available on the web. We are monitoring tens of millions of company websites for changes. Anytime someone's added or removed from a company leadership page, that's actually then being fed to our data research team to validate that. We've got over 300 researchers globally who do a lot of web-based research, but also do a lot of data labeling and helping us understand when we get things right and when we get things wrong. And all of that gets fed back into our data science team, who then improves our algorithms and models so that we can process a lot of this data way more intelligently. Just to do a little bit of a double click into some of the types of data that we're acquiring too. We've hit on company data and contact info, but we also have signals related to job changes, news, what's actually happening publicly about companies. We've been extracting insights from earnings calls. And so every quarter when CEOs and CFOs talk to analysts in the market about trends that they're observing from a macroeconomic perspective, what are the pain points that they're experiencing in their business? What are their goals? What are their strengths? All of that's getting fed into our platform as well. We've got that buyer intent that I hit on that helps our customers understand when prospects are starting to research their product and might be in the market for buying something that they sell, as well as funding data, changes to financials, mergers and acquisitions, divestitures. We're collecting all sorts of insights and signals from this really wide variety of data sources that we have too. And then really what sits at the end of all of this is our data processing engine. So one thing that's really interesting, and if there are any folks who have spent a little bit more time thinking about data on the call, all this data comes in without a unique ID, right? We've got to figure out ways to match it all, right? So being able to scan a news article and understand the people and the companies that are mentioned, being able to then associate that with the right companies and people in our database. Oftentimes we'll have dozens of contacts who have the same name. So getting really intelligent about matching using multiple fields and multiple characteristics about these individuals and companies becomes really important. Once all that data gets matched, we spend a lot of time classifying it. We also spend a lot of time standardizing it into our standard taxonomies. Just having a raw job title is great, but if you want to find all the contacts in marketing, you'd never be able to just enter, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of titles that might be associated with the job function that you sell into or the persona that you're trying to get more insight into. And so we've invested in some really easy to use taxonomies just to make sure all of our data is usable from an automated perspective, as well as still maintaining and providing that really granular level of insight as to what someone might actually do. This all gets consolidated and then verified on an ongoing basis. I spoke about how we use that contributory network email validation data a little bit earlier. That's something that's always on and always running. Every single day, we're validating millions of emails in our database and millions of other data attributes. We're also removing and unpublishing contacts and processing those changes when we learn that someone's gone from company A to company B. Even as things flow through this process, a lot of things get archived and rejected and actually fall out of our pipelines so that customers never see it because we fail to validate something or it's incomplete from a coverage perspective. And then we're also sending all of those privacy notices as well, prior to publishing any contacts too. Sometimes that results in a hard bounce and those contacts get archived as well. And we circle back at a later time when we start to acquire some of the new data attributes from this diverse set of sources. And so that's how a lot of this comes together. Always happy to geek out and talk through this much more in depth. But yeah, that provides a little bit more insight into where the data is coming from, the types of data we have, and how we bring it all together.
Yeah, I think the other component that's not highlighted on this site, but we'd more than happy to talk through in depth as well, is how we can help sort of ingest first-party data. You think of all the cool use cases around, and you mentioned Engage earlier. You mentioned sales engagement solutions or connecting to a CRM system, or somebody hitting your website and us illuminating that because we have this rich IP account graph data and understand, company X just hit your website. The last time you had a conversation with them was 2 weeks ago. And here's this interesting nugget that we pulled from their earnings cube, or it's what we call it, their earnings cube, from their earnings call, to then help your sellers, your marketers, to have a far more relevant conversation. A lot of really cool things that we can do, and it's great some of the interesting use cases some of our customers have been doing. Along those lines, and to start to sort of bring this all together here, some of the things that we mentioned are the reason why today we're seeing more than 35,000 global customers. You see some of the largest firms across Europe, across the globe, and candidly in some of the most restricted and highly regulated industries, whether it's a Barclays or a Chubb in the financial and insurance industries, Siemens sort of in healthcare, SAP, a German located firm, being able to again deliver the intelligence they need in a compliant manner, and giving them the flexibility to take the bits and pieces based on their risk tolerance, as Simon mentions, has resulted in a significant amount of trust, which we're honored to help their go-to-market motions. And you can see some of those things that over the year and really the last 8 months, like Brandon talked about, just the sort of the turning of the tide, if you will, and seeing more and more customers with a global focus coming to us when they were using alternative solutions and immediately seeing those uplifts. Brandon talked about improvements in connect rates, improvement in deliverabilities. This particular customer, Jack here, was able to see immediately a 10% increase in their UK customer base, and growing that rapidly by making that switch. Several others across the board, being really happy with being able to now prospect in Europe, just like they were able to do so in the US, touting the quality of the data and in global markets, not just in North America, but across the globe, as Brandon showed you in that slide earlier. We continue to innovate, we continue to invest to be sure that our customers are able to do business where they want and with the quality information that they need. And that not just being recognized by our customers, but by really industry leaders. So we were named a leader in the Forrester Wave here for sales and marketing data providers in B2B in Q1. So much so that across 21 of the 28 criteria, we received the highest possible marks. And some of the commentary from Forrester around our behavioral and intent data, the depth of account and contact information, Simon's team and their dedication to security and privacy, innovation on Brandon's team, our collection sources, how we're gathering this information, how we're normalizing it and bringing it to bear for our customers, the data matching and enrichment. As they said, quote, the company also demonstrated exceptional complementary data offerings. So things like our integration capabilities, our data management solutions, our hygiene functionality that rivals best-in-class CDP and customer data platform vendors. And then begin being a leader, not just in quality and accuracy of information, but doing it in a compliance manner. That is what really ZoomInfo hangs our hat on. And so with that, I'm going to thank you all again for joining us. We do have just a moment or two to answer a couple of questions here that came through before we break. So one of which is probably a question for both of you from a data collection standpoint. And Simon would probably have a privacy slant to talk about some of the AI. But what emerging trends or advancements are you seeing sort of shape the future landscape of data? How might these developments impact either your customer base or ZoomInfo?
We haven't worked out who's going first. Brandon, I can go first. Up to you.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'd highlight a couple of things, Steve. First one, as you say, AI. So the EU AI Act was passed by the European Parliament, I think, last week, and is the first really heavy-duty piece of AI regulation out there. But there's plenty of other proposals in different parts of the world, including the US, and there's all sorts of sector-specific pieces of regulation around use of AI for in particular decision-making in different sectors. So that's going to be something which really informs all aspects of what we do. Most of it doesn't affect our kind of world because it's focused on things such as deep fakes and the like, or really important decisions such as whether somebody gets credit. But the fact remains, it will encompass everything, and it will affect how we can explain how we use AI. And in some sectors, then, like I say, if there's meaningful decisions about people, they'll be very heavily regulated. The other thing I think which affects our world is an increased focus on data brokers. And on one level, ZoomInfo is a data broker, but it's a B2B data broker. And if you actually ask legislators what they're focused on, very often it's the nastier end of B2C data brokerage, really spying and tracking and profiling individuals in their daily lives. So we spend a lot of time making sure that we are compliant with every regulation that is out there, and we're part of that discussion, but also that everyone understands that we're not in that world. We're in a very strict B2B business world where there's much lower risk. Brandon?
Yeah, and I'll echo the AI impact as well. Something that we've seen is AI is really helping us move a lot faster as it relates to a lot of that innovation. If you think about, taking all of the content that might appear in a news article, and if you want to extract a new insight from it, that used to be a pretty time-intensive process that required a really talented data scientist to write a new model, test their hypothesis, get a lot of infrastructure and technical components set up, and then you would run it, and then it would fail, and you go, well, that was a waste of 3 weeks. Something we're seeing a lot now with ChatGPT and Anthropic is almost anyone can test these new things out instantly, right? You input some text, you ask questions, you're able to evaluate if it seems to be working or not. And that's something that now, almost anyone on this call or at ZoomInfo is able to experiment with and then share their feedback with us. Here's what's working, here's what's not working, here's a new attribute that we think we can extract from this source. And we're able to iterate and test on that, almost instantaneously, so that when we do hand it off to our data science team, we know it's going to be a huge success.
I think one of the things I've had a lot of conversations with other sales leaders, one of the talking points around AI is, to your point, it makes it easier, it makes it faster, it makes a lot of things to be able to do these things at scale. One of the concerns they have, though, is, hey, if I don't have the right information, well, now all of a sudden we sent a whole lot more wrong messages to a whole lot more wrong people. And what you often see in your world, or what people are concerned about, is hitting that spam button, getting caught because it's not relevant. And now you just, at the click of a button, hit 1,000 people with a hallucinated email versus what your seller was trying to do on a one-on-one basis. So we very much are reliant upon AI and AI first in terms of our platforms and where we're going. But the heart and foundation of successful strategy and resulting in AI is the quality information of the underlying motion there. I think our last question, or sort of there's a two-parter, I think, one of which, Brent, I think is sort of directed to you. You talked a little bit about, and we often run into this or hear this from customers. You talked about like all of the data that we don't publish, all of the data, the millions upon millions of records that we have that just don't meet our quality standard, or have chosen to take control of their profile and be removed from our platform. And so one of the questions we get often from customers, or I think they view our data at times, is, hey, you're lacking. I didn't see Brandon Tucker at ZoomInfo. You don't have the contacts I need. Can you just sort of walk through a little bit on like how we can support customers in giving them a true understanding of, hey, we actually have that record, they've opted out of the platform, or hey, you have this record and they're now out of date, which is why we don't publish it in the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the first one is relatively straightforward, right? Sometimes people do opt out of our platform, and we always respect that. The opt-out is forever, right? We never add them back. We're never going to send any information about them to any of our customers. The other thing that we can actually do is, and we've been investing in something that we're calling an enrichment engine, is we're actually starting to make more data available to our customers, contextualizing why we're not providing that record at all. There was a few examples I've looked at over the years. It really manifests itself through either company coverage or contact coverage. We had a huge company, one of the biggest companies in the world, provide all of their company data to us. And they said, hey, you were only able to match 60% what's going on. We then actually took all the other domains that they provided us. And when we started to point our crawler at them, we saw that 27 out of 30 that we initially tested were dead websites. And so we've started to build out a repository so that when people ask us to enrich that data, we're not just no longer going to say, hey, we've never seen this company before, we've got nothing to add. We're starting to provide some of those dispositions, actually indicating why the data is lower quality, or validated as bad from our perspective. Something we see on the contact side all the time too is someone will ask us to enrich an email, and we'll know that email is invalid. And so we're starting to provide those dispositions, or we might not know that it's invalid, but the last record we saw on it was from 12 years ago. And so we're working to make a lot more of that metadata available. And so if anyone's a customer or a prospect on this call who ever is interested in not just being able to understand where we can enrich and update records, but is also looking to clean up their CRM, remove those outdated companies that are now defunct, clean out those contacts who haven't worked at the companies you have in years. That's something that we've also been developing solutions to help solve.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Well, gentlemen, I think that's going to do it for our time. I want to thank you both for spending the time with us, to our customers and potential future customers that have joined us today. Thank you so much for those that are watching at home on a recording. Thanks for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it. I do want to provide just one friendly reminder that you will receive this on-demand recording within the next couple of days here. And we hope to see you all at the next ZoomInfo webinar. And if there's a data problem that we can solve, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much, everybody.